Hello, I'm here with Ms. Bach today. Hi, Ms. Bach. Thank you for coming.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Okay, so the first question I want to ask is what's one of the things that you learned from the conference that you would take back to your classroom so far? I know the conference it's only been the morning, but what have you learned so far?
I actually attended a really exciting clinic this morning, and it was all about alternative assessment. So, not necessarily giving a test at the end of the unit to see what you've learned. So, I have some really creative project ideas that, still get at what have you learned, but have you present that information in a more creative way, still asking you to analyze and put facts together, but not necessarily have to do it in a test.
So, would you mind sharing some of the ideas you learned?
Sure. Um, we learned about a constitution project where you find news articles and connect them to certain parts of the U.S. Constitution to show how they're an example of that, of our government working, every day in the news.
So, like say like it was like the Connecticut mock trial, like you would find that article and connect it to like how they would like like review it or
Yeah, it would be any relevant news article that you would find that you could connect to a certain article section of the Constitution where we see, for instance, like a court case where we see, if we look at the judicial branch, that's all laid out in the Constitution and how um, that's supposed to run, what their obligations are, and how they function for that branch in government. So you would connect an article that maybe talked about a court trial and connect it to the judicial branch and how it's laid out in the Constitution to show kind of that in action.
yeah. What was one of the most I can't say the word pro what is productive, that's what I'm looking for. What was the most productive project or assignment you've ever done in your classroom?
I think taking a look at a figure from the Renaissance, from the Italian Renaissance, I had my students either explore a famous author or painter, artist, sculptor, thinker, philosopher from the Renaissance, and they had to put together almost like a science fair project where they gave a biography about that person and gave a few samples of what they were famous for, either, if they were paintings, if they were a famous painter, or ideas that person had, if they were a famous philosopher. And we presented them all towards the end of the year with our Renaissance fair and set up almost a museum, and that was really fun because we celebrated and got to walk around and see everyone's projects, and we ate Italian food to go with that, so it's always fun when you can incorporate food.
What is one of the things that you have learned from your students?
A lot. I think from my students, I've learned that it's very important to always, or as much as possible, enjoy what you do and think about, I always try to keep the student perspective in mind and think about how they might be perceiving a lesson or perceiving a project that we're doing, and I always try to keep their perspective in mind to just instead of how I'd be viewing things, how they'd be viewing things. And I have I have that always in the back of my mind when I'm planning or running a class, and I try to keep that in mind.
What was one of the assignments that was a go when you were thinking about that? Like when you thought about them, what like was successful, and and why was it successful?
Well, we just did a really fun lesson last week on the triangular trade, and I was thinking what would be a fun way to learn about the triangular trade. So I actually had the students, in a sense, travel it, and we set up a triangle in the classroom with different stations representing different stopping points along the way. And each station had information about that particular stop, whether it was on the west coast of Africa, the Middle Passage, the Caribbean plantations. So they got to travel that. And then as I kept thinking about it, it's like, what would be a fun way to like get people hooked into this idea and get people thinking and excited. So we actually made origami boats first because you can't sail without a boat. So that was a fun way to get engaged, to get the students engaged and into it.
Well, thank you for sitting down and interviewing with me today.
Thank you for having me.